Gavin, it's an absolute honor and pleasure and privilege to have you join us. Welcome. We're thrilled that you're here. So today's conversation is all about play. So from my side, I promise to keep it fun. No pop quizzes, unless you think we should have one. Open to any recommendations from your side. But Gavin, your reputation and credibility really precedes you. So can we kick off with you just telling us a little bit about yourself and, of course, Keller Education as well?
Thank you so much, and such a joy to be with you this morning. And I love the fireside chat at 8 o'clock in the morning. That's absolutely amazing. In Cape Town, we often need fires in the morning just to get up. So lovely to be with you. I have an interesting story, and the story is that I absolutely hated school. I spent my life at school working out how to get out and never come back until one teacher made a fundamental difference in my life. And that difference was a grade 9 teacher telling me that I could do maths. In fact, he referred to me as a mathematician, and his incredible ability to engage and connect and believe that every child can, and that not only a few do, resulted in me doing higher grade maths to matric, and then going on to study maths and teach maths in my career. So the story that we really carry out in Keller Education is that it's not the what that's important. It's the manner in which you teach it. So whatever content we decide that we are going to deliver to students, the pedagogy behind that, the process of getting it, because the brain is a natural learner. And so, once I had retired, two investors who had visited the school several times asked us if we would be interested in starting a company, and they would provide all the seed funding. And they have just been amazing supporters and co-founders in the work that we're doing. And we're currently working in about 250 schools in Southern Africa and loving every minute of it.
Wonderful. That sounds a mathematician at grade 9. That must have really blew your mind. I still don't get lots of maths, a lot about maths. Basics are good for me. The trigonometry and stuff we'll park for a little later. So, Gavin, what really fascinates me is how the foundation we set in early years in the lives of children pretty much shapes the way they think, the way they learn, the way they grow. But for those of us who are lucky enough to have teenagers at home, let's be honest, right? Who needs Google? They are walking encyclopedias. If you write, they'll tell you as supposedly compared to Google, you seem to be right. So, Gavin, why are the early years considered the most critical period in a child's development, and how does specifically play-based learning support this?
So such a lovely question. Let me just tell you about your teenagers. When you compare your teenagers with your early childhood development, we're talking about teenagers being basically brain damaged, and your children in the first 2,000 days being at the most incredible stage of their life of brain development. So whereas teenagers are actually going through such high levels of pruning, starting at the back and moving to the front, that they often will present as being most impossible. It's just because they are going through a particular stage. But in the early childhood, and I like to talk about the first 2,000 days. The 2,000 days takes us just over the 5-year mark. And that is a fundamental stage where we either, and I want you to understand this, because the brain of the human, unless it was without oxygen for a good 10 minutes at birth, or there was fetal alcohol, there are very, very few things that will cause the brain not to operate in the humans. We are designed to survive most things. Obviously, lack of oxygen over 10 minutes and things like fetal alcohol. But the rest, everything is in that brain, where every human is born 200 billion neurons all set up, not connected, just set up. And what we do from the moment that baby arrives and hits gravity and discovers that there's no longer there's a lovely space to just float around and faces the real world at birth for 2,000 days. I like to push that to 3,000 so that they're 8. I would love to see school starting at 8 and not at 5. But in these 2,000 days, what caregivers, primary caregivers do is that they allow those neurons to find pathways through experience, through experiencing the world, and through connection with the caregiver. And so they lay pathways in multiple experiences. The more different environments we can let children experience the world, the more we can get them to play, the more we can let them just discover, because we as humans are natural learners and natural discoverers. If we just create the place for them, we will allow those pathways to connect, and they will become hardwired in all the key areas that humans require them to become hardwired. Sadly, in the last 250 odd years since in human evolution, since we started this crazy thing called schooling, which is the human brain hasn't evolved to cope with it. The human brain is not designed to sit for long periods of time. It's not, legs folded, hands on your lap. It's not what we as humans do. We might do it at the end of the day around a fire, but we certainly don't do it in the morning as children. And so in this crazy notion of schooling that sort of came about with Industrial Revolution and trying to make sure that we can divide children into workers and managers who are going to be able to, we use them effectively in the factories. We developed this thing called schooling, which is a disaster in every format. And those of us who have been very much part of it, who have worked it and tried to change things and make school a good place, we have worked so hard and often against much competition and aggression from the powers that be, simply because we were so determined to make school the most incredible place. And for some reason, we decided that reading and maths was more important than dance and music and art. And so we made sure that we did reading and maths every day, and only occasionally a little bit of phys ed and a little bit of dance and a little bit of art. And then when we hear the national averages, you never hear how many grade 4s can dance like superstars. We never hear that. We hear who can't read for comprehension, who can't read for meaning. And reading is an exceptionally difficult process for the human brain to master. But it can be done, and it's best done through play. And so where we've placed play as something we do after we've done work, the research is very clear. The science is very clear. Play has to come first. And from the play, we can teach the lessons and develop the things that we need to know.
That is incredible. We hear this often enough, but you just broke that down beautifully, Gavin. Really, you did it. Lots of thought-provoking, mentions, learning new skills. I think we underestimate that for children. I'm constantly told by my teenager that I'm not a techno-native, I'm a techno-immigrant, and therefore it's going to take me longer to learn the things that he probably learned as a child. Gavin, when I joined Cotlands around 7 years ago, I was deeply moved to discover that some children had never even experienced the simple joy of holding a toy. I think it's something we take lots of that for granted. And that's when I understood that, every child deserves more than survival. They deserve joy, they deserve discovery, and really a chance to thrive. So can you tell us, what role does toys play in a child's learning and development, Gavin?
So you'll be fascinated, and you might know this piece of science that is just mind-boggling. I'm always traumatized when I see so few ECD teachers that know it, but it's the Jamaican study that took place in 1986 and 87. And what they did is that they took a group of stunted Jamaican children in deep poverty. And then they took the control group of unstunted children from middle-class communities. And the stunted children all received 1 hour visit from a community worker / social worker, but they weren't highly trained social worker. They were just community workers who went into their home for 2 years and taught the moms, the primary caregiver, and the little child how to play with instruments and things around the house or the shack, wherever they were growing up. It wasn't, let me go and buy you the latest Lego toys. Let me go and get you the next wind up. Let me get you the correct puzzles that you can do to do your place in space and your figure ground. No, just sticks and stones and cups and saucers and things that they could play with. And, they then tracked these children for 20 years. And this piece of research is mind-blowing, because when they tracked them, they saw very little effect of the play base that they had as children until 17 years of age. So through their foundation phase, where you have all these neurotic foundation phase teachers say, oh, he can't do that, he can't hold the pencil right, he can't double, he can't halve, he can't concentrate, he can't self-regulate, all these things that we, little tick list trying to, what can you do, what can't you do? They didn't see any change to those. They didn't see any change to grade 4. Only at 17 years of age did we see this remarkable impact happening. And at 22, after the 20-year cycle, what we found is that all the children who were stunted from deep poverty, were earning at 22 between 25 and 42% higher salaries than the control group who had it all. Money, environment, all the exposed to all the things that middle-class children would have. And this Jamaican study has shown, that if we want to get rid of poverty, you're not going to get it by sending these kids to the wealthy schools and giving them all the things that we think, giving them extra math lessons. No, you want to get rid of poverty. Teach little children under the age of 2 how to play. Because play literally removes the poverty option when you take children in poverty and your control group. And so literally, the Jamaican study showed that we could eliminate poverty simply by teaching play. Because you see what happens in play. The 6 C's come into play in play. One, we have to collaborate. Now, at 2 years old, you're not really particularly interested in collaborating because you are so focused on doing it your way, my way. But it's quite cool to have people around. So I might be in a sandpit with another kid, but I'm not all that collaborative yet. But the more I sit in that sandpit and have to share the spade, or I want the bucket, I might grab the spade and the person sitting next to you might grab it back. And so we start using communication, and that's not necessarily the spoken word. It's signs and huffs and moans and groans and shouts and whatever. So we start communicating. Collaboration leads to communication. Once we can talk about it, we can deal with whatever content we've been thrown, whatever. We're going to be building a sandcastle and we're going to be doing a tunnel through the middle. That's the content. So now we can collaborate with the other kids in the sandpit. We can communicate how we're going to do this. That content gives rise to critical thinking. And the critical thinking, once we can go deep, and the problem with curriculum right around the world, and especially in South Africa, our curriculum is too wide and too shallow. So the moment we take our content and we go deep, we get to become critical thinkers. And that critical thinking gives rise to creative innovation. How can we do the sandcastle in a way that's really fancy? Maybe we can put some shells on the top. Maybe we can put some leaves on the side. Creative innovation. And the creative innovation will lead to the confidence that we need. So those 6 C's are fundamental in the play process. And when we get that right, and when our schools are joyful and they're interactive and they are good places to be and they're places where you feel safe, in those first 2,000 days, in those first 5 years, when that is in place, then we can do anything with those children. Those brains are ready. And will we see it in grade 4? No. Will we see it in grade 7? No. Will we see it in grade 9? No. 17 and at 22 were the 2 markers in that research that showed us the incredible effect. But let me just go further very quickly. The adult skills that just shone out from the others, the adult skills. Let me just give you, there were 20 of them, and I'll send you this later. Things like cognitive development, pro-social skills, mental health, attention improvement, coping skills, motivation to learn, building friendships. 20 adult skills, much higher in the stunted group than in the control group. So childhood play actually changes the quality of the adult life. And when we start seeing school as a process of making you into a confident, competent adult that can bring value to the society, then we stop looking at this ridiculous focus on marks and who can and who can't and who needs to be above average and below average. We take them on a journey of learning. And the best vehicle is play.
Yeah, so it's not just the 2,000 days. It's shaping the child's future, really. I mean, it's only going to shine through, as you said, those 2 age markers, Gavin, like at 17 and at 22. You know, that is just, it's just mind-blowing, isn't it? I mean, even what you said about the emphasis on academics and marks, etc. You know, so, we have academic students leaving tertiary institutions, glorified textbooks, really. What do they do with the knowledge they acquire there? And the bridge between the practical life and the theory is just, yeah, it blows me away. And, you know, for a child, play is instinct. It's their natural way of engaging with the world. And it's not just what children do, isn't it, Gavin? It's how they really make sense of everything around them. You know, and you touched on poverty, and I'm glad you did. We'll come later to how the play actually breaks the intergenerational poverty cycle. But for now, Gavin, can you share a story, perhaps an example that illustrates this transformative power of play in a child's learning journey? I think you alluded to that already, you know, how it just shapes the future. But perhaps you have a particular story or example you'd like to share with us that illustrates this.
Well, you know, one of the joys of being old is is that, you know, I've been a kid, and my father used to call me a playboy. Now, when I tell the story, people think, oh, really? Well, but the old version of the playboy, where you just spent your life playing. And he was always saying, if you could just concentrate, just for like an hour a day at school, maybe you will become something. But life was just too good. and we had this massive sand pit in the backyard, and we had water, and we had pipes, and the neighborhood all gathered at our house, and my mom was a great baker, so she would just bake food, and everyone came to our home, and we just built the most incredible. And when we moved from the sand pit, we moved over the road to build tree houses on the field, and we built fuffy slides. I mean, I honestly, we didn't in my day, we didn't go to preschools. Only the poor children who had terrible parents sent them to preschool. But you went to grade 1. We knew nothing. My granddaughter, she's 4, and she had a parent meeting the other day, and the teacher saying, she gets a little bit confused when she gets to 30, 40, when she's counting 30. And I honestly, I wanted to vomit right at that moment. Not that I was hearing the story afterwards, but I mean, when we went to school in grade 1, you went up to 9 in grade 1. In grade 2, you went from 10 to 99. In grade 3, you went from 100 to 999. So it was very, very small incremental steps of doing it over and over again. And so play for me has always been fundamental. I literally went to school in order to come home and play. And my friends and the neighborhood and the street tennis in the street and playing soccer, and that was far more important. I didn't study for a single examination. My mother just basically drank Old Brown Sherry at every exam to see if hoping I'd get through. Then I went to study teaching because I was determined to create a school where kids had fun. And then we had our own 2 boys, and we just raised them in a play-based environment. And then we've had the most wonderful season the last 10 years to have 4 grandchildren, and to apply the new science that we've learned with these 4 little precious things. And so the story I want to say is that I've lived the life, I've walked the talk. And the things that I'm sharing with schools around the world today is that I'm telling you that play works. I can have a son who's a BSc in software, software engineering and computer science, making the most incredible children's movies today. And the other son's got a BEd, he's the CEO of our company. I mean, incredibly academically successful boys. And my wife and I did most of their homework. They would come home, if there was anything to color in, I mean, is it an art course? Are you crazy? Go play, Mom and I will color it in for you. I had a school for 27 years, no homework. We reduced the testing to a minimum. If the department wanted numbers, we just filled in charts with numbers on and sent it to the department. And I can tell you that we had in the external examinations, the systemic exam, some of the highest results. Why? Because kids were happy, playful, learning was focused, it was fun, and it was enjoyable. And just to wrap up that story, when I eventually agreed to open a preschool at Musco, because I really didn't believe that 3, 4, 5-year-old children should be in the school environment. But it became very clear that if I didn't do it, I was going to lose bums on seats in the grade 1 classroom. And I made it very clear that there was going to be no desks in these classrooms. They were going to come to school, they were going to play. And of the 128 children that had enrolled in the first year of that, 10 pulled out in the September because they wanted to go to a preschool that was going to do worksheet-based fill-in. And 10 on a budget that we required to run this was huge. But it only lasted 1 year, because once those parents discovered the joy of children coming to a ECD center, which is joyful, interactive, where they're learning the skills and then doing them in different contexts constantly, having the most incredible fun, laughter, music, dance, theater, dress up, all the things that are just so incredible. Well, from that year onwards, until I retired, we had a waiting list in every year group. And so my story is that if you brave enough to take on what I call stupidity, which is the bureaucracy of education, if you're brave enough to take on stupidity, and stupidity can be very powerful, if you're brave enough to take it on, you can show, you can demonstrate the success of play very, very simply.
Stupidity is, how did you say it again, Gavin? One more time.
If you're brave enough to take on stupidity, stupidity is bureaucracy. They can't think beyond the dome, which is a mark-based grading system, certain stage at a certain age. No science. There's no science for averaging of marks. There's no science for giving someone a 1 to a 7 or an A to an F. There's no science, because what you do in that moment does not reflect your ability. We as humans are learning at such a pace. There's no ways that I can fill out a tick list at the 5th or 6th of September so that I can speak to those parents at the end of September, because let me tell you, within one day in an ECD, in those first 2,000 days or in the first 3,000 days, in one day, the brain will lay a new neural pathway and will connect, and it'll become myelinated, and it'll become focused and become fast, and suddenly they can do it. Things that they couldn't do, they can do the next day. And so we have absolutely no science to back grading, marks, average, and IQ scores. IQ score is an absolute fallacy. So we've got to get back to the science, and we've got to start teaching teachers the science of learning, and we've got to explain it in very simple terms to stupidity, because they cannot comprehend that their entire world order of collecting marks and grading and deciding who can and who can't, they can't comprehend that that is a possibility. But we've seen it so beautifully in Finland. We see it in Estonia. We see it in Singapore. We see it in higher performing countries that have placed play ahead of the pressure and stress of trying to achieve these academic steps.
And this, like you said, the science is there. And it's interesting that you mentioned IQ, not so much, I haven't really seen much transformation in the EQ rather than the IQ. And, I've heard someone say once that one of the quickest way in certain instances for someone to kill themselves is to jump from their ego to their IQ. It's something that stayed with me, makes sense, I suppose, if you think about the emphasis that people put on IQs, as you've mentioned, Gavin. No science behind it, really. And which is why in Cotlands, we recognize that play is not really a luxury for children. It's a developmental necessity. Like you said, the science is all there. And when children engage in purposeful play, they're not just having fun, are they? They're laying a solid foundation for their future. And that's what's so remarkable. Gavin, if you could just briefly, I think you alluded to it earlier as well, but just what are some of the long-term benefits you've seen when children access quality early learning, especially in underserved communities?
So let me just throw another bit of research at you, because when people have done longitudinal assessments, I know in my gut that it's worked because I've done it, but I'm such a practical, hands-on mover and shaker that and because I'm ADHD, I forget to get UCT to come in and track what we're doing. And one of my great disappointments in my career is that I wasn't bright enough to get statisticians to come and actually track what we did over those 27 years, which was quite remarkable as I sit back in my dotage now and look back at what we achieved. But the piece of research I'm wanting to just share with you was an incredible piece. Let me just get the details here in front of me so I can talk sense to you. But what was so fascinating about this piece of research was the fact that, and Penn State University in the States in 2015 released this 20-year study. And they took 753 5-year-olds. And they got those preschool teachers, those 753 children, their preschool teachers, to rate them on a 0 to 4-point scale, as we teachers love to do, 4-point scale. We've now gone to a 7-point scale, whatever. Anyway, they got them on a 0 to 4-point scale. And they had to assess them on all the things that preschool teachers assess. Maths ability, reading ability, getting on with others, interaction, self-regulation, all the things, sharing. 4-point on a 4-point scale, 0 to 4, so it's basically a 5-point scale. And then they tracked them again for 20 years. And this they published in 2015. And this just blew my mind, because it's everything that I believed that was happening in my school. I now had the data to back it up. And what they found is that it wasn't the children who got 4s in maths that were doing very well 20 years later at 25, or in reading, or in computer science. What they found is that those children at 5 years old who could share with other children, who could help others, who could settle a dispute in the sand pit by giving and taking, who could cooperate, who would listen to an instruction, who knew how to stop when they would say, Gavin, stop, who could stop. Those were the children who were the highly successful ones at 25. And so those soft skills, we now know OECD has just launched a paper this year to show that it's the soft skills that outperform these hard skills that have been the focus of our bureaucracy. And I just want to give you a little, and I'll send you this research because it's mind-blowing. For every 1-point difference, so in other words, a kid that got a 3 instead of a 2 in, say, sharing, they were 2 times more likely to have a degree after 20 years. They were 54% more likely to have completed high school, and they were 46% more likely to hold a job. And the opposite worked as well. Those kids that were 1 point lower than those kids that did well were 67% more likely to be arrested by the age of 25. 82% of them would have had a recent involvement with marijuana. And another 82% of them, just with 1 point lower, required public housing by 25. What is the message? We've got to get our act together in schools and start teaching, especially in ECD level, sharing, caring, helping others, listening, first time listening, I only speak once, listening, and resolving conflict without a teacher interfering. I used to tell my staff they got to sit on the wall, drink a cup of coffee. You're paid to sit on the wall and be stealth fighters. In other words, I want you to watch what's happening on the trampoline. I don't want you to interrupt unless you think someone is going to die. In other words, if they are jumping so high that they're going to land on the palisade fence and be impaled, then maybe it's time for you to go down. But humans sort out their problems if they are allowed and taught the skills how to do it. So I share that bit of research with you because When we teach children to share, care, and help others, they become adults who share, care, and help others, and they raise the next generation, sharing, caring, helping others, managing your own aggression, managing, settling disputes. It becomes a wave. You see, earlier on you spoke about poverty, but poverty is not in the genes. It's not genetic, and yet it stays in this intergenerational system. And the reason it stays there is because no one has expressed the gene of those children in poverty. No one has expressed the personal ability. So, gene expression is a fascinating science at the moment. If I'm 6'5" and I marry a 6'5", there's a good chance that my child is going to be a tall child. But if I put that child into a cupboard under the stairs and just feed it bread and water, it's going to be a short, buckled child that doesn't have the necessary wherewithal to do what is required. So I didn't allow the tall gene to be expressed. And human potential gene is in all of us. It's part of our DNA, human potential, but it needs to be expressed. And what schools are flipping good at doing is not expressing human potential because you're not good enough. And I lose my mind when I see that attitude in schools. In fact, I've had to employ people in our company who are far more diplomatic and who can say things far nicer, because I just want to take them by the throat and I want to strangle them. Because for me, children are the most precious being in the world. And we can change their lives completely simply by teaching the people who are working with them, and teachers become many times the primary caregiver. Just connect, be there all the time. Get that attachment right from the beginning. When they cry, respond. When they shout, respond. Even if it means sitting on the wall and saying, Gavin, I see you, darling. You're fine, you're safe, go for it. Just that constant stealth watching, not this, what's your problem? I don't want you to be nasty to each other. Let's put a mark on the chart. Let's have a good, for being, no, flip, man. That kid's looking and saying, this is a doftani here, and I'm not going to be doing this. We've got to let them be. Sorry, a long story, but it's
no,
it's
I
my
love the way
passion.
you express that, and resonates in every word, Gavin, and that's what's great about it. I mean, just listening to you, and I was thinking and reflecting at the back of my head about some things that happen, and my smartwatch is actually beeping now and saying, "Watch it, your BP is rising," because it's just annoying me when I reflect on some things, like where the emphasis is put on, really, and like you said, it's flippin' madness, isn't it? It's just craziness.
Absolutely crazy.
Gavin, and this is a good point to actually come to that point about the poverty cycle, because like we said, ECD, early childhood development, it's not just about development of the child, but when children access this quality early learning, this play, we give them the chance to break free from the cycle of poverty. And so, Gavin, if we can just allude to a little bit, how does that accessing of quality early education, this play education, break children out of that intergenerational cycles of poverty?
So the secret is, we often think, and I love the little, I was so delighted, the little cover slide you had up before we started. There were a number of pictures, and I counted, there were 3 of those pictures, the vast majority were kids playing. There was only one sitting at a table reading a book, which is fine. It's great to read a book, but ChatGPT will read to you perfectly these days and give you the meaning and read back in your own stylus. I mean, it is important to learn to read. It is a wonderful skill if you want to be a teacher or politicians don't read. I'm thinking, who else reads? A pastor or something else. But there are so many more things that are vital. And my dream, before I start pushing up daisies, is I would like to see us finding corporate funding to pump the work that we're doing into every ECD center in Southern Africa, whether it's in a container or a garage, where we can train the teacher. Maybe it's just a facilitator. I don't believe you need a qualified teacher. You need someone who has been trained in the ability to connect and transform children's lives. And that's simply through relationship, because we are relationship people. We're warm-blooded. We like to be touched. We like to be hugged. We like to be smiled at, smiley eyes. We talk about smiley eyes. A child doesn't look below the nose. The brain focuses on this eye. And if you've got smiley eyes, the child feels safe. And so effective, we often think, oh, it must be beautifully sterilized and it must have astro. I was at a school the other day. I said, if you had any more astro in this school, you will be a plastic warrior. I mean, honestly, just let some grass grow, some weeds, let them climb the trees. Every tree had a timber structure underneath it so that children wouldn't get dirt or sand on their feet. And I thought, you've lost the plot. You might be attracting a very wealthy cohort of parents because they like this neat, but actually, children like dirt. We love being dirty. And one of my greatest joys is in the evening to see my grandchildren arrive and they are smeared. They have jumped in puddles. They've played in mud. They've carried planks across the garden to build things. We love being dirty. And yet schools want to be pristine and neat. And we want to have a picture that we can send home. And if the child couldn't get it right, well, we would just draw it and color it in and so that they would think I'm a good teacher. No. We need teachers, and it's not difficult because it's actually quite natural for us to raise children. It's quite a natural process if you know the pedagogy, the skills required, and they're simple. Connect with the eyes, connect with the eyes, connect with the touch, because the brain's asking, am I safe? Do I belong? And remember, belonging is not fitting in. I'm not going to teach you how to fit into this boys' school. No. Belonging is accepting me because I have a unique brain, and there's no two people in this world, just like our fingerprints. There's no two people with the same brain. So we have these phenomenally different brains. And when I am told that I have value and I belong, so I'm safe, I belong, then you gain access to the prefrontal cortex, where our executive functions are. You do not get there. You cannot take any child who has not experienced safety and belonging and attachment. I have value. When a child can say, I have value, this person who works with me loves me unconditionally. I call it vomit love. You run the ECD, you are cleaning up. If it's not vomit, then it's, crap. You're cleaning up. One end is spewing out something most times in an ECD. The person who does that sends a powerful message that I love you. You are precious. You are unique. Come, sweetheart, let's go on this walk together. And so, I'm passionate about teaching people how to work with children. And in every case, how to deal with stupid, because stupid is coming in and handing, you've got to do this. I want to see these number of worksheets done. I want this data sent to me. And then we teach them how to manage, I'm going to stop calling them stupid, but how to manage those people who don't know the science of early learning, in fact, learning, and how to sort of work alongside them. So on Thursday, we're running a webinar called Do Marks Matter, and it's gone crazy. We have got so many delegates from around Southern Africa on it. And we're going to show that we're living in a mark environment in our schools. Everything's marks, but they do not matter. because the brain is designed to forget. We get 6 days. And then the brain says, if the brain has not had a revisit of that data, the brain says, not worth keeping. There's too much. I need to prioritize what is stored. So you can finish 13 years of school and you can go to university and you will not remember what you did. And once you've done your degree and you've stood on that graduation table and you've got all the things, you can leave there and not remember. That's not because you've got a memory problem. It's because the brain is designed to forget unless it is repeated in different contexts. It's like almost like snapshots. The brain takes us like the old Polaroid. You remember the Polaroid? It takes a snapshot and it's fading. But the more you blow it in the wind and the more you do it over in a different context, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger until, okay, I've got it. And so we know that if we can repeat it 4 or 5 times within a 4 or 5 week section in different contexts, it's hardwired. And that's why so many of us hate school, because it was hardwired.
You know, Gavin, if I could really stand up right now and shake it like a Polaroid picture, I would certainly do that. Say it and say it loudly. I mean, the investment in ECD, we're seeing, a lot of buzzwords being thrown around. I mean, if we look at the Department of Basic Education's 2030 strategy on ECD, they love the word social compact. We see that coming out very strongly. And we understand that, real change in the space of ECD around investment, we know it doesn't happen instantly. But we also know that investing in ECD means planting seeds today that will shape leaders tomorrow, shape thinkers tomorrow, citizens, contributing members of society even. And it's a sustained commitment, isn't it, to unlocking lifelong potential. And I think that's where the shift should happen, what I call reconfigurating the motherboard. That's where it really needs to happen. So how do we respond? Or specifically you, Gavin, how do you respond to those who see early learning as a short-term rather than a long-term investment? I mean, people say you speak to corporates and you say, do you not understand if you don't invest now, you are decimating your own future workforce? I mean, that's just one knock-on effect. But how do we just translate? It's not a short-term quick fix now investment, but it's a long-term investment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's education. So often, even teachers and principals, they'll say, but Gavin, I cannot allow my preschool to play all day. They can't play. The parents will go to another school. I said, they're only going to go to another school if you haven't taught them the power of play. And it doesn't have to be purposeful. Purposeful play is great when it's directed by the teacher in the ECD. That's great. But if it could be undirected, in other words, the child directs it and the child initiates it and the child directs it, we just have this free, open play, which is so good for the brain. When we teach people the value of it, when we show them the research findings, when we bring to them that value, then we start seeing little lights go on. And my message is that we have to educate like we've never educated before. And we've got to educate not with someone who has an idea, but someone who has got the wounds and the stab marks in the back and people who've walked the talk. We've also got to educate why these big fancy words that we're using in ECD need to go. And let's get down to the basics of what good teaching looks like. And let's create space where children love coming to school, love it. Because every child is unique, eh? And so we've got to have a variety going on. This idea to, just to give you an idea, again, Finland is just I visited Finland for the first time in 1999. It blew my friggin' mind. And then Pasi Sahlberg, who wrote the Finnish curriculum, wrote a book in 2018, I think it was, called Let the Children Play. And he just put all the research behind it. And he showed, tragically, that if you have murdered someone and you are in prison on death row, you are by law entitled to an hour of free time every day. And yet we have schools that think, you know what, if a child doesn't behave, we're going to take away their break. If you haven't finished your work, you're going to do it during break. And so we've got to educate them that play is fundamental for the human brain to develop. And our mindset that it's a waste of time is a wrong mindset, because the only reason we've got this mindset is because we don't know the research behind it. So we've got to shout it from the mountaintop. And in the work that you folk do, you are just the great mountaintop, and you've got the great mouth and the great sound. You've got to shout it wherever you go, that the future of this country is in the ECD field, in these first 2,000 days, maybe 3,000 days, if we take them up to 8, where we can express human potential, and corporate will benefit greatly from it later on. Just to wrap up very quickly, we working with a group of rural schools in Lichtenberg, and the big solar field provider has got us working with all the schools in the area. And we showed, because now I've got clever, and I've got clever people around me we've tracked it statistically. And in 1 year, we have seen children's love for learning grow dramatically. We've seen attendance at school grow dramatically. Why? Because teachers are playing, and the play creates the fertilizer to feel safe, have a sense of belonging, so that I can access my prefrontal cortex, where I can think deeply. As I said, Pasi Sahlberg, he created that Finnish model. And in Finland today, their school day is 4 hours. And each hour is made up of a 45-minute lesson and a 15-minute playtime. 45 minutes. And after 4 hours of these 4 sessions, you go home. No homework, no exams. And yet they are constantly in the top 5 when it comes to assessment on the PISA, which is another conversation, but for countries that like to compare their ability, in the top sections. Why? Because their children learn so well when they play. Yeah. And there's no rainy day procedure there. When it's snowing in Finland, they put on your raincoat, put on your Wellington boots, go and play. We've got a 1,500-kilometer border with Russia. Yeah, you got to get used to this, the rough time. And so often in our schools, oh no, they can't go and play out in the rain. So beautiful book, Pasi Sahlberg, Let the Children Play.
You know, I just have one very, thinking about all the spaces where we need to, like you said, sound, just say it loud, say it proud. I just have, I suppose, one very important question for you, Gavin, following from what you've just mentioned. Do you come in a pocket size for travel convenience?
So I, because I'm a connector, I really was not very pro the design model of our company, because it's basically an e-platform. And I know, and we know from COVID, that I can't connect with you digitally. So you're watching me, but I can't really connect with you because my mirror neurons in my brain can't get through the network to reach you. But when I engage with you, when I sit with you at a conference, when I dance with you, when we paint on newsprint together and then we connect. So it's very hard to do the work we're doing unless we have opportunity to get into the schools and into the things physically. But we have really worked very, very hard to create a digital format in order to reach teachers as well on our e-platform. And that's the pocket-sized version. It at least gives teachers some practical tools on how to participate in joyful learning. And if the teacher's joyful, it's so contagious. The kids will be joyful. A miserable teacher, a miserable class. I always say, my discipline problems at school are not the children. It's the teachers and the parents. So let's solve those two, and we'll correct all the problems that we so-called the problems that we see with children. Because children they just want to be loved and nurtured, given boundaries, given acceptable guidelines, and they will fly.
Yeah, I guess that's why they say a smile is contagious, isn't it? You turn that frown upside down and the world smiles with you, and we've really seen it, Gavin, this has been amazing. I wish we could just go on. There's so much more I want to pick your brain about, chat about, and I'm just hoping you're accessible, and I'm sure you are, beyond our fireside chat today. So we're really, really grateful for the insights you shared with us today, Gavin. The conversation has just been nothing but inspiring and enriching. You'd think you know a fair amount, around play, and then you just throw these gems around and I go, wow, nothing just, it doesn't cease to amaze you. And when you hear people like you speak with the passion. So you've given us plenty to think about. Now, I was going to say maybe a little bit homework, but I think let's park the homework and say a little bit more of play than going through and doing some homework. But most importantly, Gavin, you've reminded us why the early learning really matters. It's been inspirational, something certainly for all of us to ponder. That, every child deserves a first chance, not a second chance at what they never had, a first chance. And when we invest in a child's first years, we don't just change one life, we change generations. Right. So thank you for inspiring us today. Thank you for joining our chat, and thank you to everyone out there for joining our conversation. We've enjoyed it, and we're sure you have enjoyed it with us as well. And thank you, Gavin, once again. All the best to you. All the best to Keller Education. We'll certainly connect after this. Thank you. And and with that, back to you, Nazizwe. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow, what an inspiring conversation. Thank you so much, Gavin. So thank you so much for the